Shalom. This week's Torah portion is Parashat Vayechi, the final portion of the book of Genesis, Sefer Bereshit, beginning with verse 28 of chapter 47. Our portion focuses on the final years that Yaakov, the patriarch Jacob, spent in Egypt. These were his happiest years, having finally been reunited with his beloved Yosef and surrounded by all his children. The past couple of weeks in our Parsha talks here, we've been focusing on the idea of the redemption and on its agents, Mashiach ben Yosef and Mashiach ben David. Well, the saga continues in this week's portion. When Yaakov became ill and he knew that his time for leaving this world was approaching, he summoned all his children to his deathbed. Chapter 49 begins, and Jacob called to his sons and said, "Gather together that I may tell you what shall befall you in the end of days." Midrash relates that he intended to reveal to them the time of the end, meaning the secret of the end of days, the Messianic era, the time of redemption. He knew this secret prophetically, and he was prepared to tell his children everything. But then suddenly, our sages teach, he was prevented from divulging the information because he lost the revelation. The Shekhinah, the divine presence, withdrew from him, and this prophetic knowledge was concealed from him. And thus, as chapter 49 opens, Yaakov immediately changes track, and we hear no more talk of the end of days. Instead, Yaakov proceeds to bless his children. This is how Rashi famously explains the opening words of Parashat Vayechi. Yaakov wanted to disclose the timing and nature of the final redemption, but that spiritual insight departed, and then he began to bless his children instead. So start to open up your heart. Our sages share the following ostensibly cryptic, mysterious teaching in Tractate Sanhedrin. Three things come behesech hadat, an expression meaning unexpected. The three things are Mashiach, finding a lost object, and a scorpion. The plain meaning of this enigmatic statement is that all three occur when a person is not consciously looking for them. They arrive unexpected. Just as one does not expect to find a treasure or to be stung by a scorpion, so too the Messiah's coming cannot be predicted. It arrives when one is not thinking about it, behesech hadat. But the rabbi's pairing of Mashiach with the two examples of a lost object and a scorpion feels deeply esoteric, and it surely must be highly symbolic. This is clearly not given as a three-way casual connection between seemingly unrelated things, but as a metaphorical set of teachings about the nature of redemption and spiritual deliverance itself. So why are these three things grouped together? What is the connection? Examining the trio, we indeed find a profound symbolism connecting these three seemingly unrelated ideas. A lost object, that's something whose absence was felt and whose return brings exhilaration. A scorpion is something fearful that strikes without warning. And Mashiach, the most profound possible historical event for Israel and the world, is also beyond our human anticipation. The message seems to be that all divine intervention, even the deepest blessing, arrives beyond human expectation and calculation. Well, let's face it, Mashiach is the ultimate surprise. The very definition of surprise, look it up, is an unexpected or astonishing event, fact, or thing. So his arrival, the sages are saying, will not follow predictable natural patterns or human expectations, neither signs nor schedules, but will happen suddenly. This description of his arrival as unexpected is precisely because the redemption depends not on our reasoning or projections, but on divine timing that can be precipitated by our own inner spiritual readiness. Maybe this explains one aspect of why Yaakov's prophecy about the end of days couldn't be given in a conventional framework. The ultimate redemption is not subject to human timing or signs. It comes beyond expectation. So the sages further explain that there are two types of hesech hadat, of this state of unanticipation. To suddenly find something of value, a sudden windfall, like finding something that was lost, is a pleasant surprise. This symbolizes unexpected blessing, something precious that one didn't anticipate finding. The comparison of this experience to Mashiach suggests that redemption can come as a gift, unbidden by human design. But there is another kind of unexpected event mentioned in this teaching, and this one is an unpleasant surprise, the sting of a scorpion, something sharp, sudden and painful, and sometimes, depending on the scorpion, dangerous. Some sages actually read the trio as a spectrum of possible reactions to the messianic event. If one is spiritually prepared and aligned, Mashiach's coming will be like finding lost treasure, joyous and uplifting. But if one is not prepared, his coming can feel like a scorpion's sting, difficult, unwelcome, or even painful. This alludes to an idea that we're all familiar with. The coming of the Mashiach is a fact, a divine promise. However, the manner of the Mashiach's arrival is largely dependent on how we behave and will reflect our spiritual status. And referring to the coming of the Mashiach, the famous verse in Isaiah chapter 60 and verse 22, the prophet states, "I am Hashem. In its time, I will hasten it." The verse seems to contradict itself. If it is to be in its time, meaning if the redemption is to come about in its divinely ordained default time, then what is the meaning of "I will hasten it"? That Hashem will make it happen faster, that He will bring the time forward and bring in the redemption earlier than scheduled. So our sages resolve the seeming contradiction. They say, if Israel is worthy, the redemption will come hastened before its set time, and if not, it will still come, but in its appointed time. This presents a profound theological tension. Is redemption a fixed, inevitable event in history, or is it contingent upon our spiritual readiness? The answer is both. The end will come, but how and when depends on us. Both scenarios are potentially true. There is a predetermined default time, but if we are found deserving, it can happen quicker, more pleasant, and Hashem promises that He will bring forward the time in His kindness. As usual in Torah thought, it seems that everything is left up to the partnership of man. Now, the rabbis warn against attempting to calculate a date for Mashiach's arrival. The practice of making such predictions is discouraged because it is spiritually counterproductive. And that's precisely because Mashiach's arrival is beyond human calculation, beyond the expected order of things. And the deepest truth is that if Mashiach can come at any time unexpectedly, then one must endeavor to always be ready, not to be waiting for a sign, but to be prepared by living with hope and faith and righteousness every day. This is deeply relevant to the theme that we're exploring now, that Yaakov intended to reveal truths about Acharit HaYamim, about the end of days, but the prophetic vision was withdrawn. At the same time that our sages teach that that prophecy was taken away from him, at the very same time, they also teach that the appearance of Mashiach, the climactic event of the end of days, will not follow expected patterns or timelines, but will arrive suddenly and, in fact, unexpectedly. So perhaps the very nature of the end of days is not something that can be revealed in advance, because the ultimate revelation comes unexpectedly. God's timing is not ours, and focusing on dates may distract rather than prepare us. As Maimonides writes, the timing and form of redemption cannot be placed into a predictable prophetic framework. But open up your heart in the deepest way. Is it possible between us that despite the withdrawal of the spirit of prophecy, that somehow Yaakov still, in fact, did reveal some of the secret of the end of days anyway, even though the prophecy was taken away from him? What if Yaakov succeeded in transmitting a secret, just not overtly? What if it wasn't an event or date at all, but rather spiritual truths about destiny? Many rabbis teach that Yaakov revealed the end to each son through his blessings. The redemption of each tribe is hidden in its mission. Each tribe received a hint relevant to its role in bringing about the redemption. And perhaps something transcendent was transmitted, even if not completed. Perhaps we can imagine, perhaps we can choose to believe that Yaakov began to share the secrets of the end of days before it was taken away. Reward and punishment, the fate of the righteous and the wicked, the nature of the Garden of Eden and the unfolding future, until the knowledge was taken from him. What might that revelation have contained? What kind of future knowledge would this toolkit of the end have contained? Maybe he was going to give them signs along the way. You should know that there will be 4 exiles, and each one will break you in a different way. You should know that there will come a time when Israel forgets who she is, and that is when she will begin to remember. Some of our sages teach that it referred not merely to a date, but to a pattern, a blueprint for the unfolding of history. Midrash relates that Yaakov saw the great battles of Gog and Magog and the sorrows of exile, all leading up to the ultimate redemption. He wasn't just going to say when. he was going to describe how. He was going to inform his children not only of the destination, but of the terrain along the way, suffering and resistance and awakening and redemption. But apparently God said it is not for them to know. And open up your heart deeper still. The holy Sefat Emet maintains that Yaakov's intention was not to tell them when Mashiach will come, but to reveal the fact that there is an end, and that the period of exile has meaning and is part of a divine design. In this view, the revelation was not about a timeline, but a transformational awareness for the sons of Israel, understanding that the exile itself is not random, but has purpose and a hidden structure, that knowing there is an end could change the existential experience of exile itself. The Sefat Emet explains that Yaakov's desire to reveal the end of days was meant to give his children an awareness that exile is finite and purposeful, that knowing there's an end could give meaning to the long journey and make the entire period bearable and meaningful. Rather than seeing time as a linear series of dates, this tradition emphasizes the spiritual dynamic of concealment and revelation itself. In that sense, the end is less a calendar event and more a pattern of hope woven into the soul of the people. So as the Maharal writes, the Holy Maharal, the deeper understanding of the idea of this lost prophecy is that concealment itself is part of the redemptive process. Yaakov's failure is not a flaw, but it is itself a teaching about the shape of the divine plan, that some things are revealed only in their unfolding through faith and inner transformation rather than through chronological prophecy. Now, this is all true on the level of every individual as well. Chassidut teaches that galut, exile, has an inner spiritual meaning, not merely as history, but as a state of the soul's concealment from the divine. In this view, the experience of physical exile parallels the internal spiritual exile that each individual experiences when God's presence feels hidden. The work we need to do when we are in that state becomes active participation in the process of redemption. Yaakov's words are not merely a lost prophecy awaiting global fulfillment, they are also a map for inner transformation for every individual. This idea that galut and geula, exile and redemption, are not only historical errors, but spiritual conditions. It reflects a broader worldview in which every person's personal service of God, meaning every person's life, is a journey from concealment to revelation. And in this light, hiddenness itself is a spiritual stage, not failure or the absence of God, but the inner landscape of the soul, where the soul must seek connection in the latent, concealed dimension of divine presence. This mirrors the teaching that what is known as personal devekut, cleaving to God, can take place most intensely in hiddenness, not in overt revelation. So Yaakov's very phrase, "what will befall you in the end of days," can be understood as transcending a chronological future prophecy and becoming inclusive of what each person will encounter in their own spiritual path as part of their divine service. An aspect of the end is revealed not only in distant future events, but in the inner spiritual awakenings that each person must face. In this worldview, the ultimate end of days is not only a chronological moment, but an unfolding inner reality in which the soul's bond with God becomes ever more consciously revealed. And isn't that the goal of life, my friends? And then the real question becomes, what does the end of days mean for each person, for each soul? Not only as the most decisive event on the world's timeline, but as an inner turning point, something every person encounters when God reveals the hidden places of the heart. Yaakov's words were not only about global history, they were about the human condition of waiting, encountering, and transforming. Even if the full prophecy wasn't communicated in explicit terms, the very invitation to gather and confront the end of days is a constant call to the soul for each and every one of us. Rabbi Nachman teaches that the hiddenness of the end of days is essential for spiritual growth. We may not know when the final redemption will arrive, but we all face our own end of days moments of surrender and awakening and transformation. And Rav Soloveitchik reflects that withdrawal of prophecy reflects the transition from divine determinism to human responsibility. Yaakov's switch from revealing to blessing symbolizes that we must build the future ourselves. And Rabbi Sachs puts it so simply and so beautifully. To know the end is to remove the need for hope. To reveal a fixed endpoint would undermine free will and the dynamism of history. God withholds knowledge of destiny to teach that our responsibility is not to know the end, but to shape it, to shape the journey. The end of days thus becomes a timeless realm of personal, spiritual inner work. The holy Rav Kook views the concept of the end of days as an ideal of human and collective spiritual perfection that Yaakov wanted his sons to strive for and embody. Yaakov's desire to reveal the end of days to his sons was not merely about a historical forecast, but a desire for his family to strive through their own efforts towards attaining the ultimate spiritual goals towards which all life moves: constant love of God. In this sense, even though the prophecy was taken from him, the purpose of that prophecy continues as a call towards spiritual completion. Rav Kook teaches that the dream of redemption is not a fixed timetable, but a living spiritual thing, and that Yaakov's desire to reveal that vision is part of the very trajectory of destiny. By framing the end of days not as a list of signs, but as a spiritual ideal and internal goal, Rav Kook affirms the deep purpose behind Yaakov's attempted revelation. What truly matters is not knowing the future, but striving towards spiritual completion of the heart. And this is a visionary spiritual psychology of redemption. So while prophecy and redemption cannot be calculated, the end is ultimately about love of God and spiritual perfection, an ideal that every generation is called to realize. So open up your heart deeper than ever before. We have seen now that the ultimate revelation cannot be verbalized. Yaakov's prophecy of redemption was not lost, but it was hidden, precisely because the end itself is not calculable. It is not a predictable event on a timeline, but a destiny continuously being woven through our choices. Not a date, but a process that will finally be completed and arrive at a moment of divine meaning that will break into history when least expected. But it's hidden in plain sight. And that mystery invites us to live with hope and readiness every day. Rather than predict the future, we prepare for it through faith and our own inner spiritual growth. It lives in each generation's struggle and on an even deeper level. It is a personal truth that is part of the quest, part of the life's work of every individual, a spiritual state through which each person must pass, transforming hiddenness into revelation.